Have you ever caught yourself explaining a decision, action, or thought in far more detail than necessary? Perhaps you're afraid that the other person will misunderstand, judge, or question your motives. This is over-explaining, a common habit that many of us develop. While it may seem harmless, over-explaining often reflects deeper emotional patterns and can be exhausting for both you and the other person. In today's video, I'll discuss why we over-explain, the consequences of over-explaining, together with strategies for overcoming it and forming better boundaries. I'm Jo Banks. I've been a professional executive business coach for 15 years, and I'm sharing what I know. In both our professional and personal lives, the tendency to over-explain often reveals an underlying struggle with setting and maintaining healthy boundaries. Over-explaining frequently stems from experiences early in life, particularly during childhood. These habits then follow us into adulthood, impacting our professional, personal, and social interactions. Learning to recognize the root of this behavior is the first step towards setting healthier boundaries, but making meaningful changes takes time and effort. It's not something that happens overnight, but with awareness, practice, and repetition, we can learn these patterns and adopt healthier and more empowered ways of communicating. Over-explaining is something that I have to work on, and I recently realised just how bad it was when I received a message from a friend. And forgive me if I've talked about this before in a previous video, but it's worth revisiting anyway. My friend Sharon and I arranged dinner one evening, and that morning she texted me to ask if she could rearrange. There was no explanation. Her text just said, "Sorry, can't make it tonight. Can we rearrange?" Now, I had no problem whatsoever with that. But what really struck me was that if I were the one cancelling, I would have felt an overwhelming need to explain in dramatic detail why I couldn't make it. I also see it with my clients, especially those with heavy people-pleasing tendencies. They'll go to great lengths to explain why they need to postpone a session or why they've been unable to do their homework, when an explanation isn't even necessary. They often write an entire email explaining their many and varied reasons in really great detail. Why do we over-explain? Over-explaining is more than just providing unnecessary details. It's an unconscious habit that often reveals deeper fears or beliefs about ourselves and how we relate to others. Here are some common reasons why people tend to over-explain, especially in the context of their early life experiences. Number 1, childhood conditioning. For many of us, the tendency to over-explain begins in childhood. If you grew up in an environment where you were regularly questioned, doubted, or not taken seriously, you might have developed the habit of over-explaining yourself excessively to prove your worth. Some children are raised in homes where approval is conditional, meaning that they need to justify their actions to avoid punishment or to win affection. Others may have grown up with emotionally unavailable or critical parents, which again can lead to a lifelong habit of over-explaining to gain approval and validation. Number 2, fear of rejection or judgment. The fear of being judged, misunderstood, or rejected is a powerful driver of over-explaining. This fear can stem from past experiences or being criticised or rejected after expressing your thoughts or decisions in the past. As a result, you might now believe that providing an in-depth explanation will prevent others from forming negative opinions about you or your actions. Number 3, desire for approval. Many of us grow up seeking validation from authority figures like parents, teachers, or older siblings. This need for approval can carry on into adulthood, where we continue to over explain our decisions and behaviours in the hope that others will affirm our choices. In both professional and personal settings, the urge to over explain often stems from a desire to please others and to avoid disappointing them. Number 4, conflict avoidance. Over explaining can also be a way of avoiding conflict. If you're someone who dreads confrontation, you might feel compelled to over justify your actions or preempt any potential disagreements. By offering an overly detailed explanation, you may hope to avoid questions, challenges, or negative reactions. Number 5, low self esteem. When people lack confidence in their decisions, they often feel the need to explain their choices in great detail. This is particularly common in professional environments where individuals may not feel entirely secure in their roles. Over-explaining can be a way to compensate for feelings of inadequacy or insecurity, even when there's no reason to doubt yourself. The consequences of over-explaining. Over-explaining can have several negative consequences, both for the person doing the explaining and for those on the receiving end. For the over-explainer, it can lead to mental and emotional exhaustion. Constantly feeling the need to justify your actions creates unnecessary stress and anxiety, making even simple decisions feel overwhelming. For the person on the receiving end, over-explaining can be overwhelming and at times really frustrating. It may come across as a lack of confidence or an attempt to overcompensate. In professional settings, over-explaining can blur the lines between roles and responsibilities, undermining authority and reducing efficiency. In personal relationships, it can lead to frustration or create the impression that you don't trust the other person's understanding. At the core of over-explaining is often a lack of boundaries. When we don't establish clear limits with ourselves and others, we end up over-justifying our actions or decisions, believing that we owe people lengthy explanations. We don't. How to stop over-explaining and set better boundaries. Setting boundaries is essential for creating healthier relationships, reducing stress, and fostering a sense of self-respect. However, learning to set and maintain boundaries takes time and practice, especially if you spent years, like me, over-explaining. Here are some strategies to help you set better boundaries in your professional, personal, and social life. Number 1, recognize the habit. The first step in setting boundaries is recognizing when and why you tend to over-explain. Do you find yourself doing it more in certain situations, such as when you're anxious, insecure, or around certain people? By identifying these triggers, you can begin to break the cycle. Awareness is everything and is the key to making lasting changes. We can't change what we're not aware of. Number 2, practice conciseness. Start by practicing saying less. Instead of launching into a lengthy explanation, challenge yourself to provide only the necessary information. For example, instead of giving a long explanation for why you can't attend an event, simply say, "I can't make it, but thank you for inviting me." That's sufficient, just as my friend Sharon did. The more you begin to practice this conciseness, the more comfortable you'll be with setting limits on your explanations. In fact, I used this tool just this morning. A client had asked me to look at their CV, but I'd been too busy to look at it for a few days and to get back to them. My initial email as to why I hadn't got back to them immediately went into great detail about the reason for my delay. Thankfully, though, I noticed what I was doing and stopped myself before sending it. Instead, I deleted everything I'd put and just put, "Thanks so much for your patience. Please find attached the amendments that I recommend." Simple. Number 3, embrace silence. For many people, Silence can feel really uncomfortable, especially if they're used to filling the space with explanations. However, learning to embrace silence is a crucial part of setting boundaries. After you've provided your short explanation, resist the urge to fill the silence with additional details. Allow the other person time to process your response and trust that your explanation is enough. Number 4, set boundaries in advance. In professional settings, setting clear boundaries from the beginning of the relationship can help prevent over-explaining. For instance, be direct and assertive when communicating with colleagues or clients about your needs or limitations. This might mean saying something like, "I'm happy to discuss this further, but let's keep the information focused on the main points for now." Or, "I'll provide necessary information, but we'll need to stay on schedule today." Number 5, practice saying no. One of the hardest parts of setting boundaries, especially if you're a people pleaser, is learning to say no without feeling the need to explain yourself. Often we feel compelled to provide a detailed justification for why we're declining a request or invitation, but no is a complete sentence. In personal settings and social settings, practice saying no confidently without over-explaining. You don't owe anyone a detailed explanation for your decisions. It will undoubtedly feel uncomfortable the first few times you do it, but it will get easier the more comfortable you become with it. Number 6, communicate your needs clearly. Setting boundaries also means being clear about your needs. This is especially important in relationships where over-explaining often results from a fear of disappointing others. Practice being assertive in expressing your needs, such as saying things like, "I need time to think about this," or "I prefer not to go into detail right now." Number 7, be patient with yourself. Changing long-held patterns such as over-explaining takes time. Don't expect to break the habit overnight. Setting boundaries is a skill that requires practice, and there will be times when you fall back into old habits. That's a given. Be patient with yourself and recognize that progress takes time. The more you practice, the more comfortable you'll become with setting and maintaining boundaries. Again, this is another gym for your brain example. It takes time to build new neural pathways and build those new habits. Don't beat yourself up if you forget. Draw a line in the sand and start again. Number 8, seek support. If over-explaining is a deeply ingrained habit in you and it's causing you problems, it may be necessary to seek support from a therapist or coach. It can be incredibly helpful. They can help you explore the underlying reasons for your over-explaining and give you strategies for setting boundaries in a way that feels authentic and empowering for you. The wrap-up. Over-explaining is a common habit often rooted in childhood experiences and reinforced by fears of rejection, judgment, or conflict. While the habit may seem harmless, it can have negative effects on you, your mental health, and also your relationships. At the core of over-explaining is often a struggle with setting clear, healthy boundaries. By practicing awareness, learning to say less, and communicating your needs more effectively, you can begin to break the cycle of over-explaining. However, changing deeply ingrained patterns will take time and patience. Don't expect overnight transformations. Instead, focus on gradual progress and remember that learning to set boundaries is a skill that requires consistent practice, effort, and self-compassion. What next? If you have anything you'd like to add to today's video, or you have any topics you'd like me to cover in future, please leave it in the comment section below. I read and respond to everything, and I really do love interacting with you all. If you enjoyed this video, please support the channel with a like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a thing. Finally, thank you to everybody who stays until the very end, and thank you so much for your support. It really does mean the absolute world to me. Thank you.